Thank you so much, Attorney General. So, we also are live, so it's not just all the people in the room. There are people out there in Facebook land watching as well. So we welcome them to join this conversation. And I'd like to let you know that tonight is a culmination of YWCA Northern New Jersey's Unite Against Hate series. We launched this series last week via our Facebook Live platform with 3 town hall discussions that focused on conversations with members of our LGBTQ+ community, our AAPI community, and our Jewish community. The concept for this series came last fall to me when we were flooded with stories at the same time within a matter of a few weeks. We had the shooting at Club Q, we had anti-Semitic comments kind of getting thrown at us from Kanye West, and we had a local story of an 8-year-old girl who was racially profiled while killing lanternflies outside of her home. All within this 3-week period. Planning takes time, so here we are now in February for the event. But what I never imagined when we conceived of this and when our team was planning it was that the week before the series, that there was going to be a Molotov cocktail thrown at a temple just down the road in Bloomfield Avenue, temple near to Mid, that there was going to be a deadly shooting at Monterey Park at the dance hall where the Lunar New Year celebration was having, as the Attorney General spoke to. And yet, another incident of a black man being killed at the hands of the police. And Tyree Nichols, I will say his name. So this, and the number of you who chose to come here tonight to be part of this conversation and who joined live on Facebook for those conversations, really, really reinforced to us that this was really an important conversation, that it was crucial that we come together so that we can talk about how we stop this alarming trend that we're seeing of hate crimes and the healing we need to do in our community, and especially this community. And that's why we're here. This is intentional that we're here. We could have done this in a lot of places. So let me also say that the goals of our series are very specific. We want to make sure that you all understand, if you are a victim of a hate crime, how you can report it. We want to make sure that we, as individuals, understand that, get a better understanding from those who are targeted, how it's impacting them. We want to make sure that folks who are targeted know where to go for resources and for help. And quite frankly, I want all of you to walk out of here with a to-do list. We're here to activate you. We're not just here to listen. We believe at the YWCA that empathy is the bridge to achieving our organization's mission of eliminating racism. We have been working to build racial and cultural empathy in our community for over 100+ years as an organization. Most recently, we've been using our Facebook Live platform through YWTV, where we have community members and leaders come share their stories, like we did with the last 3 conversations that we did. We do it through our program, Raising Race-Conscious Children, where we go into elementary schools and we teach educators and parents how to proactively talk about race in the classrooms, how to integrate it into curriculums. We do it through our race training. Just yesterday, I was on a Zoom with 100 other social service providers. It was the second of a series of 4 programs that we have been doing to help social service providers grow racial and cultural empathy so that they can better support their clients and so that they can become social disruptors. All of our systems are fraught with racism, even the ones that are serving the communities that we're trying to protect. And so we need everyone to understand what's happening around them, to witness it, to observe it, and to be able to have tools how to change it. And we also do this for individuals in our community through our 21-day Racial Justice Challenge, which all of you can take. We hope you go to our website or go to our Facebook page, copy the link, send us your email, and for 21 days you'll get an email with a post with a video blog to watch, an article to read, 21 days so you can learn about race, power, and privilege, and hopefully unlearn a few things. And quite frankly, it's teaching just the basics of what's really been left out of our education and our schooling. So tonight, in the same spirit of all the work we do with the YWCA, our purpose here is to do the same. Again, to grow racial and cultural empathy and to leave with a to-do list. We want you to take the time to listen closely, and we also want you to leave and process the conversations that you're going to hear. I also encourage you to go onto our Facebook page and watch the 3 videos. They're there, they live there, and you can see them that talk to some of our targeted communities. I've been doing this work for a long time. I'm by no means an expert, but I go deeper and deeper each time I learn. But I will tell you that I learned so much from every one of the conversations. And I want to point out, we do have Amber Reed, we do have Reginald Bledsoe. They were both part of the conversations that were here. Am I missing anyone else that was part of the panel that joined us? But I'm so grateful to them for participating, and I do hope that you get to watch those as well. So there's a lot to cover. We obviously have limited time. I want to thank so many of you. When you registered, we had a little box for you to put in questions. We had over 100 questions come in. Again, also a testament to how needed this conversation is and how much people are yearning to learn. And so we will do that today. We have great panelists that are going to share their personal experiences, their work experiences, to be able to help us all grow. And so with that, I want to let you know that we have handed out cards, and if you have a question as you're going, I'm sorry, they're shaking the cards in the back, so we have cards, let me say that again, we have cards. If anyone would like a card, please raise your hand. You can write down a question that you have, and we're going to try to include some of those at the end of the conversation, so please feel free to take one. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists this evening. I'm going to start, actually, I'm going to invite them all to come up first, so why don't you all join me up here. You sit closest to me. Why don't you sit in the middle? No, I'm sitting here. You're going to sit here. Yep, okay, very good. Okay, so now let me introduce to you our panel. In the center, we have Dr. Chris Purnell. If you've never met Dr. Chris Purnell, you are in for a real treat. We are so lucky to have her in our community. She is a dynamic physician leader and a social change agent. In her public health practice, she focuses on health justice, community-based advocacy, and population-wide health promotion and disease prevention. Previously, she worked at University Hospital in Newark, New Jersey. She was the first Chief Strategic Integration Health Equity Officer there, where she oversaw a portfolio which included population health, strategic planning, community affairs, and the human experience. Her office was responsible for launching the health equity strategy development and integrating diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism initiatives across all system operations. Welcome, Dr. Purnell. We have Monique Joseph. She is a mother who tries to live in a way that her children can model. She believes in treating people the way she wants to be treated, and she wants to teach people how to treat others with respect and dignity. She lives her life very intentionally and values and honors the relationships that she has with her family, friends, and community. Professionally, Monique has 20 plus years in the garment industry and is currently a realtor who works to foster trusting and meaningful relationships with her clients. In addition to her professional accomplishments, Monique is a member of the Caldwell Board of Health, a parent volunteer on the West Caldwell Board of Education, and District 4 representative for the Caldwell Democratic Committee. Known for being composed and level-headed during the most difficult situations, Monique believes in teaching others to broaden their understanding around racial equality and that our differences can collectively create positive and lasting change. And last but not least, we have Caldwell University's own Dr. Lena Campagna. She is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Criminal Justice at Caldwell University. Dr. Campagna earned her PhD in sociology from the University of Massachusetts in Boston with a concentration in communities and crime. She specializes in victimology. Her research interests include victimization in indigenous populations and factors that influence victims to report to police. Her research work, both solo and co-authored, has been published in the Law and Society Review, the Journal of Criminal Justice Education, the American Indian Research and Culture Journal, and the International Review of Victimology. Dr. Campagna also serves as an elected executive counselor for the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences Victimology Division. And so with that, I'm going to join everyone over here. And again, I really want to thank all of you for being here and thank the three of you for agreeing to be part of my brainstorm. I have to say, I really do believe that in this room we have the power to change the statistics that the Attorney General spoke of. So we need to remember that throughout this conversation, and especially when we leave this room. We want you to feel empowered, and I know that the conversation we're going to have is going to do that for you. So I'm going to start by asking Monique a question. So unless you're living under a rock, over the last few months, and actually in the last 2 weeks alone, Bobby has received a lot of national attention, right? People Magazine, CNN, she's been on, Good News Movement. The other day I was just scrolling through my IG feed at 3 in the morning when I wasn't sleeping, which is a normal act for me, and I was like, boom, 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 boom. They were at Yale University where Bobby was honored, NJIT. It just keeps on coming. So what I'd like to ask you is the optics of this to the outside world might cause some to think, wow, what a great thing happened to you. It might really confuse people and maybe minimize the impact of how it all started. So in the midst of all this, 15 plus minutes of fame, right, that has come, I want to make sure that everyone here and everyone watching virtually with us tonight can understand what happened to you and your family. What do you want folks to know happened? Let's not get distracted by all the media. Let's remember and talk about how it started.
Well, thank you, Helen, for organizing the event, and I want to thank everyone that's here tonight. Many of you I've met over the past couple of weeks, or months I should say, and I've learned the sense of what my community really is, and it's no longer just the block where I live. It's people who reached out to me. Helen, I literally met her through this journey. I met so many of you, and it really means a lot, and it's part of the reason why I'm able to sit up here today and have this conversation. So I just want to thank all of you. I want to thank people who are on Facebook. Many of you couldn't be here, and I have to thank you because the support was necessary. And like Helen said, people see the cameras, they see us all over, they see us at Princeton, and the perception, the optics are that we are benefiting from something. But the truth of the matter is, on October 22nd, that morning, when the incident happened, my entire life changed. How I live, how I parent changed. How I open my front door changed, right? My daughter, Bobby, the night before, so she had been at this Killing the Spotted Lanternflies for a couple of weeks throughout the summer. And the night before it happened, and typically I go out with her. I'm the one out there with her every day. And I said to her Friday night, Bobby, tomorrow I'm sleeping in. Right? So, you know Bobby, it's not gonna go over well. So Bobby wrote a note to me. She wrote a list, and Bobby's 9 years old. She wrote a list to me, and it was a little list explaining to me why she deserved to go out tomorrow morning for a couple of minutes by herself. And it was like, she earned it, right? She told me she would carry her cell phone, she would keep her pocketbook across her body so that it wouldn't fall off. She explained to me how she was going to spray, but also look for cars. She would only cross. She was very specific. And I said to myself, I did not want to allow her to go out, but I could not let her go out, because she earned it. She has an older sister. Hayden has earned that right. She goes out, she's responsible. And Bobby is going to chase that independence a little bit more than Hayden would, because she's chasing Hayden. So I allowed her to go out. And a couple minutes later, I was so happy. A friend of mine asked me to go out with her on a walk. And I said, sure. Spying on Bobby. Walk. Right, so I opened the front door, and I live on Elizabeth Street. If I open my front door, I see the parking lot of the synagogue across the street. And when I opened the front door, I saw the officer's car slowly rolling by, and he stopped at my neighbor's home. And I saw a conversation. And I'm a parent, so I'm watching, but I'm also watching Bobby. What is she doing? I don't want her to really see me. And I'm trying to figure out in that moment, what am I going to do? Am I going to give her the house keys? Am I going to let her know that I'm not in the house? What am I going to do? And seconds later, I hear a comment that was said to the officer, and he said in a tone that got my attention, he said, go get her. And that was the first thing that caught my attention. And I said to myself, I wondered, who upset him, right? So seconds later, the officer, he rolls up and he's engaging with Bobby, and I stopped, I'm like, what's going on? And when I saw him get out the car and I saw Bobby stop and they're having an exchange, I come down the steps. I'm a black woman. So if I see an officer talking to my child, whether he is trying to arrest her or not, I am not going to go and fly off the handle. I don't have that privilege, right? I am going to be composed. The number one reason is especially because Bobby's there. I'm responsible for what she sees, right? She models her behavior after me. So I knew I had to be calm. I knew I had to let the officer know, please do not approach Bobby, she's 9. And I'm yelling this as I'm walking, but I'm nicely yelling it. My neighbor's there, he's still, blowing his leaves. He saw me running past. And I think a lot of you saw the body cam, so you know what happened after that. But what really happened for me was this idea that it's two things for me. It was, I never wanted to believe, up until the moment that I heard the 911 recording, I never wanted to believe that the intentions that many of us are upset about, what we knew could have happened to Bobby, right? I didn't want to believe that. I wanted to believe that it was really about what he told me. He thought she was lost, right? But I read the words and then I heard the audio, and I literally got sick, right? Physically sick. I could not breathe, right? When you know that someone does not stop, someone who has your phone number, someone who knows you, someone who you've helped them, someone who you've said to his wife, I know what it's like to be a caretaker. If you need cream, text me. I live at home with my sister and my 2 daughters. We were those kind of people. I was that kind of neighbor to them, and I wanted to believe that they were those kind of neighbors to me, right? So immediately, the reality shifted quickly the minute I heard the 911 call. And there's no way to hear it and not understand what could have happened to Bobby, right? And so I'm not a person who reacts on what could have happened, right? So I knew what could have happened, but I also knew that I was blessed because we had an officer who, I believe that this was all orchestrated, right? That officer, it was the right officer, right? it was the right situation. Bobby was a girl, and she was little. So, you know, if you got the right officer and you have this little person, you know, maybe he would see it for what it was, and he did, right? But then what happens, we had this exchange, it was peaceful, and I walked away and I said to myself, I need to speak to him, because I don't, even though it was friendly between the officer and I didn't understand why I didn't get a text, or why I didn't get stopped on the way walking when he heard me calling, right? So I tried to have the conversation, right? We have mutual friends, it's a small town. I delivered a message through one friend. I didn't hear back from him, and I didn't, you know, my style is not to, I don't need a cheerleader squad behind me. When I realized he didn't return, you know, didn't call me back, I said, okay, he doesn't want to get in the middle, that's fine. Then I called the police chief and asked him to have a conversation, and we had that conversation. And my only ask was, can you speak to him and ask him to mediate a conversation between the three of us? Because I needed him to understand that I was literally getting sick, right? I was sick, I was afraid, right? There's no way to hear those words and think that someone doesn't mean your child harm, right? You don't understand what that feels like. You know, this is not, you know, if you're lucky, racism, you live on the peripheral of it. You know, you might feel it from your boss, you might feel it from a coworker, but when you open your door and you see someone and you say to yourself, they adulterized your baby, they didn't care when the officer told them who it was. You know, you heard the comment. And I never, like, I'm not a person who, I care what people think, right? But I'm not a person who I don't hold grudges. You know, anyone that knows me, I say what I have to say and I move on. I could not move on. I could not move on. One, because I was sick, right? Why was I sick? Because I thought this man wanted to hurt my child, right? Because there's no way living in the United States of America as a person of color, if you have an engagement with a police officer and you know that they were told that they were scared, they were a white person and they said, I'm scared, this person is wearing a hood, and it's a black woman. To me, that was a signal, go get her, like he said, right? So what happened after that was, after I spoke up at our town hall meeting, my doorbell started ringing, strangers, people wanting to share their experience. And that added on to the burden, right? That added on to my burden. I couldn't talk without coughing. It was not COVID. I couldn't sleep. My bedroom was on Elizabeth Street, the street that we share. In the middle of the night, I'm up. I'm of a certain age, I get a little hot, so I gotta get up, right? So there's the bathroom, there's water, and it's check the window, right? I don't know how many of you check your window to make sure that it's okay, because for me, January 16th happened the other day, so now I have people ringing my bell. Hindsight 2020, thank God, it was people just sharing a story with me, but I didn't know if that was gonna change, because what happened, it just happened. Right? So Bobby lost her independence that day of going out by herself. I was sick to my stomach. Hayden, who is in high school, she had to stop going outside. And I mean the backyard. I mean our backyard, our trampoline, because I didn't know if we were really going to be safe. So, and this is all while Yale is happening and Princeton is happening. Because that's what we do as moms, we juggle emotions, we juggle tasks. So I juggled being sick, smiling for the camera. One thing that I knew was I had to speak up. All right, I knew I had to report it. One, because I was gonna go crazy if I didn't. So, to your point, Helen, I was juggling. You know, I was juggling like mothers do and fathers do, right? But it was not easy. It was not easy, and it's still not easy.
Well, I thank you for sharing that story, because I know every time you have to share it, you have to re-experience it, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. I don't know about the rest of you, but I really want to live in a world where, a mother, a black mother who has experienced a trauma doesn't have to be generous with her experience to share it, to teach those of us that look like me how to be better. But yet this is the world that we live in. And so I thank you for sharing that detail. I just want to acknowledge that I know that it's difficult for you every time you share it. And again, the optics for the outside world, when you see the articles and the TVs, we should never forget how this started and what this family has been through. So, people knocked on your door. A lot of people stopped you at the grocery store, bumped into you in town, and started sharing their stories because they were in other targeted groups. They may not have been black, they may have been from the LGBTQ community, they may have been from the API community, they may have been from fill in the blank, but they had an experience in your town that was similar experience for them, that they felt like that they needed to come tell you. And now you're carrying their stories too, in addition to Bobby's. So can you speak to us a little bit? I mean, here I just shared, obviously it's so generous of you that you're sharing your story. And there is a lot of, social media is, one of those places where, as we know, people are very bold and say a lot that they would not normally say in person. There's a lot of conversation in Facebook groups demonizing you, demonizing, the attention that you're getting. I'd like for you to talk to us a little bit about, obviously you told us how the experience has impacted you, but you've mentioned over and over again in all the interviews about wanting this to be a teachable moment for the rest of us, for the community. So talk to us about kind of the calling now. I mean, obviously everyone laid it on your shoulders, you're carrying it, but you're moving forward with it. And I think that that's part of the community healing, that's part of this conversation for folks to hear.
So for me, it was definitely a burden, it was a burden. People sharing, their Me Too stories, experiences, I should say. But, I held it. I had no choice but to, and I knew, I believe in Jesus Christ, right? I believe that he created every single moment. I believe these people were led to share with me for a reason so that we could be here today. I didn't know it then, right? So as we journeyed through the next couple of weeks, what also happened was I started receiving a tremendous amount of support. People that I had never heard of, literally saying, I heard your neighbor's going to sue you. If he does, I will support you financially, don't worry. I had people, social media, like people reaching out to me saying, hey, I heard, and if there's anything I need to do, we need to boycott, we'll do it. I literally met you in the same conversation. Helen reached out to a friend, Maria, who found me from the Women's for Progress organization, literally called me and said, what do you need? We got you. And I'm like, whoa, right? And they were willing to do anything that I wanted. And what was ironic about it is they had this fire. All of the women who I met on this journey, they had this fire, this militancy that the truth is I couldn't even have that as a black woman, being angry. I couldn't have it. I told Maria, please do not boycott my neighbor's house. Please don't. Thanks, don't. Let's do something else, right? Right, but so I want you to know that we were supported, right? And again, it happened for a reason, right? So the holidays come, things start slowing down a little. I said, I have to be present for Bobby and Hayden. And not that things came to a screeching halt, but I kind of just slowed down a little. And when I came out of the holiday season, I said, okay, what am I going to do now? And I started remembering the phone calls, the doorbell ringing, the social media in my inbox, and I decided to marry these two experiences, the burden and the support. And what that looks like for me is I decided to start a coalition in the West Essex area And the reason that it's the West Essex area is because that's who the support came from. So it is from the mayor of North Caldwell. It is from the ex-mayor of Montclair, Bob Russo. It is from the YWCA. It is from the Women's for Progress. It is from the synagogue across the street from me. It is from First Presbyterian. It is my neighbor, Stacy, who is here. It is from the people of that area, right, all over the West Essex area. So I said, okay, this is not going to be in vain, right? Because I stood up and I said I wanted to be a teachable moment. And so part of the teaching for me was showing that even in my anger, even in my pain, I can still be positive and I can still do something to help create that change. So I decided to start this coalition, and it's still very much in the infancy stages, but it is to be a landing spot for people who find themselves in the situation that I did, because what I learned from them sharing their experiences, not one of them reported it. They moved away, they didn't report it. A woman told me she didn't tell her husband because she didn't want him to go off, right? And so I was fortunate. I was fortunate because I met Jonathan Lace, a councilman in town, because we had a situation in 2020. Hayden and I, and someone rode past our house and yelled out a racial slur. And they were campaigning, and I'm like, oh, who's this card? You know, so I called him up, Jonathan. And he helped us, right? Because at the time, the police, the detective, he was a little slow at getting me an answer. And if you know anything about me, when it comes down to Hayden and Bobby, there's nothing slow about my response. So I called Jonathan, and what that taught me was how to speak up, how to report. You know, he told me exactly what to do, right? And so when this happened, I knew who to call. But a lot of people don't know who to call, right? Especially if it is the police, who do you call, right? Not Ghostbusters, right? So for me, I married that burden, women sharing their journeys with me in town, families sharing their journeys. They were young children. There's a gentleman, he was adopted by a white family, and when he called me, I broke. Right, I broke down because he's a black boy, and they moved away. They moved away, and he heard the story. And was like, he told his mom, I have to find this woman, you know, because he wanted to meet Hayden and Bobby, and I was too afraid at the point, right, to even let him meet them. But what I wanted to share with you guys is that teachable moment is so many things. I want to teach my allies, right, that you have the privilege to be upset at the police, and I don't, right? You have the privilege to do that, right? I want to teach moms and dads that when these things happen, even if you have the privilege, they're watching. Bobby is okay today. Why is Bobby okay? Not just because the officer was nice. You saw her, she asked the question, am I in trouble? She meant that. He doesn't know Bobby, the world doesn't know Bobby. When we came inside, she was not with the poker face, right? But I knew that she was not only modeling my behavior, but I knew that if I did not keep my self-control, and not just that day, it's the days after, it's every day, how am I going to teach her how to respond when things don't go her way, right? Those are the everyday lessons we teach our children, right? So I want people to understand that when you speak up and you use your voice, you do have a responsibility. You know, one of the things that hurt me, and the mayor at the time was John Kelly, I was so concerned because there was a police officer's car outside of our home, because we share the same street, right until after Christmas, I want to say. And I called him and I said, why, you know, I was pissed because Bobby, there was a message to her, like, Mommy, you just tell me I was okay, but I really wasn't because they're watching me. No matter what I said, she thought they were still watching her. And when the mayor told me it was because my neighbor had death threats, I started crying. And he's like, no, what's wrong? And I said, I don't want that. You know, and I said, you know, I'm gonna go to his house right now and tell him, like, we need to talk, we need to go on social media. And he said, you will not do that. He's so upset at you right now, you will not do that. And I said, okay, well, I'm gonna pray for him, right? And so part of that message and why, I think Bobby and my family continue to receive is because of that grace, right? If you meet hate with hate, hate's coming right back. I guarantee you, right? It's coming right back. So I did not give anyone a real opportunity to say, oh, look, she deserved it. Look, she was hiding something. Look at her. They want to detract. You were not going to detract from your behavior because of me, right? But so it's a lot of things. It is the fact that a teachable moment is something as simple as we have made ourselves so vulnerable. Everyone knows my address. They know where I live. You know my daughter's names. You know their ages. You know what school they go to, right? And I'm okay with that, right? Because that's part of the burden. My mom always said, Monique is not a punk, right? And I'm not, right? Because I also know, and one thing that I want to say and I want to make clear, and I know you didn't ask me this, I want it to be known that I have a great respect for the Caldwell Police Department because not only how he handled himself that day, every time I see them, I was in with the police chief just today, and they do not let a moment, every interaction, how are you, how are Bobby, how is Bobby, how is Hayden, they let me know that they care. They roll past me. They were stopping the cars to check registrations, and we were so busy saying hi, and it's like, and they didn't even realize they didn't even check anything, and it was just, right? And so, right, and I want to share that because the teachable moment is not just for white people or people who are not black. I want black people to also know that not every police officer is bad, right? Not every police department is bad, Chief Bongiorno has been a blessing. He was a blessing to me. That officer was a blessing to me. I pray for him. I pray for him because I know that there are people who do not really believe that they're police officers that have that heart and that really do neighborhood policing. So that's also part of the lesson. We can all learn. Why I wanted to talk to my neighbor, I wanted to understand from him, why was it okay to just call? I really wanted to understand. I'm not afraid to have a hard conversation, and that's why I spoke up. That's why I made Hayden speak up, because I was also teaching her. So the teaching is not just for white people, and it's not just for my community. It's for children. It's for Hayden's peers to know that not only is she going to speak up, but if it happens to you, you can speak up to empower her. So it's for all of us. I'm still learning.
Well, so I hope you're all taking notes. The to-do list, you hear it, right? It's unfolding. If you live locally, there's a coalition growing. We want anyone who's interested to join to be part of it. We are collecting emails. We have your emails when you register. So if you're interested, you'll get an email so that you can join the coalition. So there's an action item for you. We also heard to check on people, check on them. That's something else, an action item we can do. So you said a lot of this. The Attorney General said a lot of this when he was here. So I want to ask Dr. Campagna to speak to it. What happens when someone is targeted and reports a crime? And also, why don't people report crimes? What's going on there? Because we know that the numbers are lower than they are, and quite frankly, they're horrific. So, what's going on there that we should be aware of?
So, I think this is working. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm loud enough anyway. My students know that without the mic. Yeah. So, on the subject of, I'll start first with reporting victimization, because that's just such a, there are so many reasons why individuals don't report to police regardless of type of crime. But bias crimes, hate crimes are just an entirely unique, negatively unique, for lack of a better term, set of crimes, right? In the sense that the ripple effect is a lot bigger, right? When you go to say, report it, and that crime, say, is recognized, I mean, the psychological effects not only for that particular individual who's going ahead and reporting, but also for community members who can identify with them as well, right? Sort of that, both that, a direct effect, but also the effect and the fear that can spread among community members. Also, when reporting, it can be, two things can happen, and this is why community response is so vital, is that, can either launch into more hate and bias crimes because it's seen as, say, acceptable, or it can be a chance for a community, and this has been shown in the research, time and time again, to show that, no, this is not acceptable, right, where we live, where we stay. I think another thing to kind of think about when it comes to bias crimes is there are real risks in reporting to police, right? Risks in the sense of not just, if I report, am I going to say be retaliated against, say, socially, right? What social consequences are there? But there are a lot of individuals too who are victims of hate crimes who are justice involved as well. So what does it mean if I'm on parole and I am a victim of a hate crime, right, or a bias crime, which happens, right? What happens if I am targeted and I'm undocumented, and I say I'm working in an informal economy? Maybe I'm working, and I'm not without, say, a tax ID. Those things can have very real consequences, and when you start to ask questions, you almost think, okay, is it really worth going ahead and reporting? One other thing, too, that's kind of interesting, I'm holding my mic up here. One other thing that's kind of, I think, worth considering when you think about bias crimes is that the ambiguity that's been just surrounding what constitutes a bias crime. Okay, so for instance, it's one of those areas where, yes, and I'm not saying that other types of crime are so clear-cut, because that's quite the contrary, but when it comes to bias crimes, it's almost like, did that really happen? Or am I overreacting? Or does that really constitute a crime? And then when you report it to, say, law enforcement or other institutions, say that in some cases don't take it seriously, then it's like further validation that, okay, yeah, that wasn't a crime, that wasn't serious enough for me to report. And other people take note. Our children take note, generations, people around us take note, community members take note. So again, there's lots of, I'd say, the risks of reporting to police in general, but also not just police, but your communities, right? Your community institutions. It's not, a lot of, when we look at our data, right, with the National Crime Victimization Survey, that really covers, crimes that are not reported to police, right? Crimes that are reported to a family member, to a third party. In that sense, there's a lot, unfortunately, that we don't know about crime, right? And, like we said, with the statistics and the numbers sort of being lower than what they are, I even, I'd say that maybe there's a term for that even in criminology where they talk about it's called the dark figure of crime, right? What we don't know about crime and victimization. Crimes, though, that go unreported, but also unrecorded by police. So some people might go to report it, and again, it's validated that, okay, no, this is not worth, recording and then submitting to, the FBI and the Uniform Crime Report, which law enforcement agencies, do, right, to get our national crime statistics. So again, there's real risks with, there's two parts of the pie there. It's, again, the whole reporting, but there's also the recording too. So we have to be very careful when we look at New Jersey statistics, but also, federal statistics as well. So, and again, I know New Jersey is taking major strides and everything, which I was super happy to hear, but my students know, I'm always skeptical of stats, right? That's just, I guess, who I am, my research orientation there. I think it's really just, it's about also getting the data, right? We need data to make the change, but there's one other aspect too that that's come across a lot in my research is language barriers, right? So we have all these surveys, like the National Crime Victimization Survey, and again, shout out to them because they do a wonderful job with collecting data, but it wasn't until 2015 that they collected data, say, in Spanish. It was only in English, and yet they call themselves a nationally representative survey. nationally representative relative to what, to who, right? So again, you gotta really look close and kind of examine, these statistics too that you're looking at, and how comprehensive are they? Because they're shaping our policy, they're getting our funding, they're, they're assessing the needs of our communities. But I would say that one of the biggest reasons why people don't report to police is either direct or vicarious experiences with police and confidence in institutions like law enforcement. That's been, there's a whole term for that too, legal cynicism. It's in the name. I mean, you just think nothing is gonna happen if I go ahead and report. And why re-traumatize myself or my family or others around me, right? So again, there's a whole host of reasons, but I think that hate and bias crimes are just so unique in the sense that there's one of those instances where you have to kind of think and almost validate to yourself and put the math together and the pieces together as to, is this a crime or not, right? Am I overreacting? Did this really happen? And then there are lots of instances too where people will recount and be like, wait, yes, that does constitute a biased crime, right? So again, lots of ambiguity there. And that adds a lot of pressure to already reporting a very difficult instance.
Yeah, thank you. The piece that people don't always realize, and I'm glad that you shared it, is that, the data collection is linked to public policy. That's what drives our legislation. That's what drives the funding. And so, we're in a very tough spot with these crimes, right? It's very real why people don't want to report them. That's very real. But by them being underreported, the resources that we're able to put towards trying to make change end up being limited. So it's definitely one of those conundrums, to work through. But from an action item for all of us, it's important for us that those folks that we keep putting in office every year in November, that not only that you're making sure that you're putting folks in office that are going to care about these issues, but then even if for some reason one of them that don't care about these issues get into office, they still work for you. And you still should call them throughout the year, write a letter, make a phone call, show up in their office, and tell them that this needs to get tended to as an issue. So I want to ask Dr. Purnell to speak to racial trauma because, in the time since I met Monique, and she'll tell you this, I have been vigilant and with concern focused on what she's carrying from what happened, from what people did in a supportive way, sharing their stories, her now carrying their stories, the vitriol in the social media groups that has, created this persona of her now that she, has to manage. And again, the generosity of coming to someplace like this and sharing her story to educate all of us, but that having to be, relived. And I know because, I talked to her about this, is, just being triggered by every other racial incident that pops up around her, that it brings her right back to what could have been.
Right, so I think it's best if I start with a definition of racism. And the definition of racism that I'm going to share with you tonight is a definition that has been popularized by Dr. Camara Jones. Another action item for you tonight is to learn who Dr. Camara Jones is, to read her Gardner's Tale. And she says that racism is a system of structuring opportunity whereby one group or population based on their phenotype or their skin color and the social construct of race is advantaged. Another group based on their phenotype or their skin color and the social construct of race is disadvantaged, but the strength of society as a whole is set. So what I have just described, what Dr. Camara Jones defines and so many others throughout the literature is system sickness. Racism is a system. And that's why we can't look for exceptional individuals. We need to interrogate and evaluate public institutions, community institutions, broader systems in our society, nation, and world, because until we do that, the system perpetuates and it produces certain outcomes. So without knowing Bobby specifically, knowing her brilliance, knowing that bold, beautiful young black girl Racism predicts that she is more likely to be harassed by the police than a little white girl. Racism predicts that a neighbor is more likely to find her threatening, more likely to say that her behaviors are hostile than someone else's. Racism predicts, because of the intersectionality of race and gender, that a little black girl is called a black woman. And we all have to grapple with that because of that system that has been operating in this nation since the very founding of it, right? That system that we saw that drove those disproportionate outcomes in the pandemic. I lost my father in this pandemic, April 13, 2020. And whenever I speak or wherever I go, I speak his name because yes, racism killed him too. And there is trauma because of that. Because we had disparate systems of care, disparate exposures, disparate risk, we had disparate outcomes. So racial trauma or race-based traumatic stress are the cumulative effects of racism, that system sickness that I defined, of bias, of discrimination, and how it impacts your physical health. She describes what has changed in her physical person. So how it impacts your physical health as well as your mental and your emotional health. It's a moral injury, right? And if you step back from it, certain persons, anyone across a group of historically excluded, marginalized, or stigmatized people like Black or African Americans, like Hispanic or Latinos, like Asian Americans, like our Native and Indigenous populations, you can experience this racial trauma, but it can also be experienced for other inequities in society around language, around socioeconomic status, around whether or not you are an immigrant or whether or not you are native to this nation. It is that experience that can lead in some cases to PTSD-like symptoms, right? Where a person has disturbances in their sleep or they have insomnia. A person might experience chest pain. A person might experience headache. A person might experience GI or nausea or stomach pains, like you physically are sick. Racism makes you physically sick. And we have the data to support it. There is the weathering effect, first described by Dr. Arlene Geronimus in 1992. And what the weathering effect says is that repeated exposure to this trauma, repeated exposure because of social or political marginalization, repeated exposure because of either overt or implicit acts of racism, either experiencing them directly or witnessing them vicariously. That leads to premature aging and death. When she looked at her research, the fertility of Black women was different from white women. And if you controlled for all other factors, their most prime childbearing years were different. For a Black woman, it was in her teens or early 20s. And for a white woman, it was in her 20s to 30s, because by the time she had lived to be 20, her body had experienced so much trauma from racism that her insides were changed. And so in communities where you know about this repeated chronic trauma that you're exposed to, in communities where you know about this intergenerational trauma that you were exposed to. For goodness sake, we just saw a Black man killed, murdered by police yet again. For goodness sake, we saw Asian Americans gunned down in a celebration. For goodness sake, we just saw another temple attempted to be firebombed. I can go on and on about what happened to the LGBTQ community and so many others. And that intergenerational trauma teaches you, oh, okay, am I to live with this? Am I to expect that there should be a different standard for my humanity than for the standard of another person? And if I may, Helen, there is nothing that makes you immune from the system of racism. My degrees don't make me immune. The fact that I am a physician, the fact that I'm a public health physician that others have called, oh, you're a hero for what you did in the pandemic. My situation was a little bit reversed. I had the onslaught of the media, right? Because I was speaking up. I was speaking up about the fact that Black and brown people were dying disproportionately. I was speaking up about the fact that I worked in a hospital, University Hospital in Newark, New Jersey, where I got phone calls when I was the administrator on call, Dr. Chris, we don't have any place for the bodies, because I was speaking up that I lost my father, that my sister was a long COVID survivor, that 2 of my cousins died. That is unnatural. And because I spoke up about that, it became, well, who is this Black woman to allege, if you will, the pervasiveness of racism, even in public health preparedness in healthcare, to say we are not doing all that we can do. And so because I spoke up and spoke truth to power, I became a threat to the system. And knowing that you are a threat, if you choose to speak up, is trauma in and of itself. I left a job that I loved because of the threat to apply for CEO. I never applied. The threat. How much power does this one person have? That is trauma in and of itself. And these are opportunities for us to deconstruct those structural determinants and those structural walls. And otherwise, you say, I can't be militant or angry, but you can. That in of itself is unhealthy. Because those who are aggrieved are told that they cannot fully express their human emotions. You cannot express your full human emotions. You must police what you feel. You must police what you think. That in and of itself is an abuse. Before I was pushed out of the state hospital that I worked for, I sat with 2 white women across from the table from me. And I said, I want you to hold space. That as a Black woman, I'm treated differently for daring to go after an opportunity that you are applauded to seek. Hold space. That I'm being demonized. That it's being said, and I'm being investigated, still under investigation to this day, attempts to besmirch my credentials, my license. Hold space. That's the trauma that racism inflicts.
And so, those of you that look like me may not have known that because it's not our lived experience, but it's important for us to understand the sickness of racism and what people who don't look like me have to carry, have to deal with. And so, the action item for us is, again, is to activate, to stand together, to support, and to ask what you need and how can I help. But when it comes to making sure that laws are passed, that systems are disrupted, every one of our systems, and I say this all the time, even the YW Save Northern New Jersey, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to eliminate racism and empower women, all of our systems are built in a way. We have to actively do work in our organization as well as others to be reframing them, to be restructuring them, to keep looking at the challenges within them. So I encourage you to think about the systems you're connected to get connected to opportunities like some of the ones I talked about that we're doing at the YW, and so many other organizations are doing great work in this space as well. Educate yourself so you can become system disruptors, so you can, and those of you that look like me have to do it because they're dealing with enough. It's our job. And I want you to leave understanding that it's your to-do list. It's your to-do list too. So, as I expected would happen, the time goes quickly. The good news is, because I read all 100 plus questions that came in, we just answered a lot of them for you. We did not get to everything. But, as the Attorney General so aptly said, I throw these kind of parties regularly. So we will do this again in community. Unfortunately, we will sometimes be doing it because we need to gather to bring attention. And again, we're here in this community for a reason. So those of you that your zip code is in the West Essex area, your to-do list is to stay connected to the coalition that's being formed over the next few months, to get on their mailing list, to think about how you can get involved, to be talking about it at your next dinner with your family. And, and Monique knows the story. I didn't even know her at the time when I heard the story about what happened to Bobby. But I read about it and I was disturbed about it. And I have 9-year-old twins that obviously are the same exact age, a boy and a girl. And I told them the story. And my daughter said, yeah, I bet they wouldn't have called the police on me, would they have, Mommy? So we need to raise that next generation. My daughter said that because I'm her mother. And I have taught her, and I have introduced information into their lives that a lot of white parents shelter their kids from hearing because they're too young to hear it. But Bobby's too young, and Hayden is too young, so why are my kids too young? At the end of the day, this is all of our responsibility to educate the next generation, to educate and unlearn our generation, and to do the work together. So we leave here with the call to action to link arms. There's so much more to say. We're not going to obviously get to it all, but you can stay connected. The YWCA, as part of this series, is we're launching a toolkit of resources. The resource toolkit will have the portal at the Attorney General's office through the Division of Civil Rights, where you can report a crime. They will assess the information, and then they will reach out to you. So many of you put very specific situations in the questions that you sent us. We will be emailing each of you back that portal information because we can't do it for you, but we want you to know how to respond. So the toolkit will have the information about how to report. It'll also have resources and support for anyone who's going through instances like Bobby's family. Let me tell you, that list is too short. And so what you should do as part of your action list is call your elected officials and let them know you want money and funding to be put into research, to be put into programs. You want to make sure that our education, I'm a social worker by training, have certificates specifically in racial trauma, teaching folks how to help support this work. When you have a heart issue, you're not going to your dentist, are you? You're going to a cardiologist. When you're dealing with racial trauma, you need to be seeing someone who's specially trained. Because I can tell you, in social work school, we didn't learn. I was there. I was paying attention. I was awake. We didn't learn how to deal with this or how to tell anyone else how to deal with it. We learned general stuff, but this isn't general from what you've learned here today. So we have some work to do. We know, and I do believe, as I said, the YWCA, our amazing team. I want to thank my team. They helped pull this whole series together. I want to thank Caldwell University's team. They pulled this evening together with us. The toolkit will be available on our social media page. All of you who got here will get an e-blast with a link for it as well. There'll also be lots of organizations that were all involved. The National Council of Jewish Women, Bergen section. We had AAPI Montclair. We had wonderful organizations that were, from each of these targeted communities came together. You'll have links to them so that you can get connected to them. I encourage you to learn. Go to their programs. I'm a member of the National Council of Jewish Women. I'm not Jewish. I attended AAPI's Lunar New Year event. I'm not from that community. But that's how I learn. I learned so much from the series, and I know my team did. I know they're scared about my to-do list because it will become their to-do list. But this is our joint work. So I encourage you all to stay connected to the YWCA of Northern New Jersey, stay connected to institutions like Caldwell University because obviously they care. They have a social justice institute. That says it all. They open their doors to us. Stay connected and follow Dr. Chris is on social media. You can see what she's up to and what she's involved with. I'd audit Dr. Alina's class, drop in to see her. And if you're in the community and you see Monique and her family, check in on them and see how they're doing. But there's lots of opportunities here. I hope that you are leaving with at least one of them. I also hope that you think about something you learned tonight and integrate it into a conversation with someone you have. You can put something on social media because that's how people communicate these days. Share it if you go out to dinner with a friend. Bring it up at work tomorrow, whether you're on Zoom or whether you're in the office. This becomes, an opportunity for what happened in this room to happen outside of this room as well if you share the story. So please do that. And with that, we're going to leave the stage. I'm going to turn this over to some of our dear friends at Caldwell University so they can close us out. I really want to thank you all for making the time to be here today. It says a lot. And so now I'd like to introduce you to Helen Antonio McGowan, who's the Associate Professor at Caldwell University School of Business and Computer Science, and Tim Kessler-Cleary, who's the Assistant Dean of Student Engagement and Retention. And they've been amazing, so I'm very grateful to both of them. So with that, thank you
all. Hello? Okay. Our work is not done. On behalf of Caldwell University and the Caldwell University Social Justice Institute, we want to thank our phenomenal panelists and moderator, as well as the YWCA, for putting together this important event. We also want to take a moment to thank all of you who showed up here tonight and who are watching on the live stream, who took time out of your busy schedule to partake in a meaningful conversation about the impact of bias on our community. Like we said, our work is not done. Caldwell University is committed to continuing to provide a forum for advocacy work. And so we want to invite everybody here to the Caldwell University Social Justice Institute's signature event, which is the annual Social Justice Symposium. This year, it will be held on Friday, April 14th. It's an all-day event, and the theme is Advocacy in Action. For those of you who joined us last year, you'll know it was a wonderful day. We learned so much. So for more information and to register, you can scan the QR codes on your way out. There are flyers outside, or you can send me an email or Tim Kessler-Cleary, who's up here. Do you want to give a thanks to?
Sure. Well, there's not much to say after that, so thank you, Helen. But again, just to the community, thank you to the administration, Dr. Whalen, Dr. Rodriguez, to Mr. Koskowski, and all of our other friends who are here this evening, our faculty, our staff, and the greater Caldwell community. Thank you. This would not be possible without you. It would not be possible without you prioritizing equity, prioritizing justice, and prioritizing creating a world where every human being can live freely. Every human being can live in a way where they can contribute to a just society, just as what our mission at this institution is. And remember that what's learned here leaves here. It doesn't stay here. Take it out to the community. Take it to the dinner table. Take it to the restaurant, wherever it is. Use this as a platform to continue the work. And I promise you, if we do that, tomorrow will be a better day. Every day after that will be a better day, and we'll continue to move the needle. And to our Social Justice Institute team, Dr. Stephanie Sitnick, Stacy Murphy, Abdul Staten, and the rest of us, we could not be doing this without you too. So thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Be well. Thank you.
I gotta give this to other Helen.